Musical comfort food.
Yeah. What about it?
So yeah, I think this topic occurred to me when I was feeling anxious about our politics, and I was thinking about, what kind of music do I seek out, when I'm low or when I'm worried or when it doesn't really feel like anything else will quite do.
I was thinking, like, what do I naturally gravitate towards in the morning and then the afternoon and then the evening? And those are my three choices
Okay.
without saying, the obvious food analogy. Okay, I
Uh,
won't say it. Somebody else say it.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Thank you,
Okay.
Eric.
Eric, do you have a third theory?
Well, I've got a phrase that I will substitute for a theory, which is sonic macaroni. So, kind of stick to your teeth, stick to your guts, something nice and bland, but kind of full and winning in its blandness. Um, or either that or this is one of those kind of, bistro concept macaroni and cheese type things where they use, select French, artisanal products and stuff and charge you $25 for it.
Right, right.
So who wants to start?
Casey and the Sunshine Band, Do It Good, 74. Huh?
That's not a joke?
No, that's great. He and his people will are guaranteed to elevate the mood. And look at these this psychedelic cover art, with the eyes looking out of the hands and
Yep.
everything.
Eyes in the hands.
That's some mystical shit right there. So yeah, so this will take you to the next level and get you at least out of the abyssal depths of despair. That's what I say. Casey and the Sunshine Band. Sunshine, right? I don't know. That's probably an acid reference. Uh, Judging by the cover art. Um, then something that probably is more predictable. Brian Eno's debut album. Here Come the Warm Jets. Those warm jets are soft, soothing, and supple. I don't know. Here we've got the synthesizer wizard kicked out of Roxy Music, going solo and bringing us such classics as Needles into Camel's Eye, Babies on Fire, and of course the title song, and then the somewhat controversially named Paw Paw Negro Blowtorch, which I think is about a vibrator. Anyway, this is a kind of strangely upbeat record, captures the kind of giddy glue sniffing mood of the early 70s too. I guess so far I've got this is probably what year is it? Well, it's probably around the same time, 73, yeah. So this and KC are coeval. Uh,
I think the warm jets relates to sex addiction.
but I think of hot tubs.
Okay.
Mm.
I think of hot tubs and sort of deep tissue massage. Here Come the Warm Jets by Brian Eno. It's fabulous. Then finally, we've got British Anomalies Blurt. And I could have chosen like one of, I don't know, 6 or 8 records I have by them, but this one has my favorite cover art, so I've chosen it. But really, you can't go wrong with Blurt. It's like James Chance, but better, with sort of half shouted, ranting, poetic lyrics and absolutely minimal accompaniment, and then plenty of skronk on the old saxophone. But the rhythm section is just a guitar and a drummer, and they are machines. And Ted Milton, who's the lead guy, basically freestyles on top of it, alternating between voice and horn. Yeah, I don't know what to really liken it to. I guess it sort of vaguely falls under the no wave header, but with sort of Dadaist lyrics. So those are my three flavors of comfort food that I submit for your approval or rejection.
Speaking of things that are maybe disconcerting when you first hear them, but you've heard them so many times that it sounds smooth and easy. My first choice, Motorhead. So I could have chosen one of like, I don't know, any 15 Motorhead albums that I have. And in fact, they had a lot more. All of them sounded more or less the same in the best way possible. Some were classics, some were okay. But Motorhead was always Motorhead. And this happens to be the very first one I ever heard. I don't know, I think I was 11, maybe 12. But essentially, like when you hear something like this so young, and not that it's super heavy, but it's pretty aggressive, it sort of sets a baseline for you
Nice.
for the rest of your life. So I actually find heavy music calming pretty often, for certain kinds of heavy music anyway. And this definitely falls into that category. This album in particular, it was recorded live. I'm not sure exactly how live, how live albums used to be put together. But
Are there any of those great stadium bull roar cheers?
yeah, there's definitely crowd noise. There's definitely, Lemmy talking to the audience a little bit. They probably didn't overdub too much. I mean, it's definitely like, their studio albums from this time are classic as well. I think this came out, I don't know, 80, 81, something like that. They had just put out Ace of Spades. So this was, their fourth or fifth album, maybe. And the songs on the performances are great. Like they're kind of, they're fast and loose, sloppier than on record, but more aggressive as well. And it just sounds huge. So great record. And definitely the kind of thing I turn to when I'm not sure what else to listen to. One thing I noticed in thinking about this topic, it's probably no coincidence that all of my musical comfort food, I have like a shit ton of records from each of these groups. So second choice, I also just chose this record almost kind of at random. This is a bootleg of a classic Dead show. Many people say the best Dead show ever. I can't really speak to that, but this is they played a show in Cornell in May of 1977, and this is a recording of it. It is indeed a great show, but I don't even know how many Grateful Dead albums I have. I have a lot. I discovered them in high school. I've sort of waxed and waned on them throughout my life. Sort of the most recent upturn for me was probably during the pandemic. And I just found it really comforting music when everything outside of my home was, at a minimum, kind of frightening and disturbing. So, Grateful Dead, comfort food number 2. And finally, shows Phil
Ah,
Sanders.
that's a great record.
I know, right? Yeah, I could have, I have a lot of Pharaoh records. I like them all pretty much. This is one of the better ones. Probably not my favorite, but probably the coolest cover, which is why I chose it. Yeah, I mean, Pharoah Sanders has always hit a sweet spot for me. I love Coltrane too. Pharoah was, one of Coltrane's disciples. He was initially sort of freer and noisier than Coltrane, and his early albums kind of split the difference. I mean, there's periods of a lot of skronk in in his early stuff, and then mixed in with really percussive driving stuff and just really beautiful sort of like sticks in your head kind of melodies as well. um, he played with amazing musicians on these records, like who's on this one, for instance? Leon Thomas, Reggie Workman, Lonnie Liston Smith, Ron Carter on another song. Again, comforting.
Mhm.
I'm never unhappy to hear Pharoah Sanders. And with that, I toss it to you, Jackson.
What's my go-to in the morning? So it's usually some kind of ambient or classical music. And I picked for my first selection Sarah Davachi. There she is, right there. And I could put on any of her records and I'd be happy. But this particular one from 2019, fairly recent, called Cantus Descant, which means song melody in the high register, or bird song, perhaps, with some interpretation. So she's Canadian, and she sought out 6 different organs in Europe and the Americas to record twice as many compositions. Yeah, it's a double record. So I would describe this as minimal drone, but there's something reassuring about her music. As you play it, I mean, I have a lot of her titles, but I notice that I'm still discovering little passages that I didn't notice before. And I'm not sure if they're improvised or if they're actually composed in advance. So that's sort of a nice element too, where that is this second guessing of what is actually going on. But the organs are beautiful. I'm just starting to notice the distinction between the different, mostly pipe organs that she picked to perform these compositions. I'm assume they're compositions. The Pelican, Midlands. So they sound like they're site specific to where she's recording them. I'm not going to make any food analogies, but for the afternoon listening, my go-to could easily be any one of the 14 John Fahey records I have. In this case, I picked Death Chants, Breakdowns, and Military Waltzes. There's something heavy and nostalgic about this that gets me through my afternoon in a good way. So what he's done is sort of like what Dylan did with folk music, both English and American folk music. He's like absorbed it, deconstructed it, and came up with a new vocabulary. That's sort of what John Fahey did in a more subtle way for Delta Blues. Oh, he also wrote some books, several books. One's called How Bluegrass Ruined My Life, which in the process of rereading because of the provocative title. Anyway, that particular book is part memoir and part fantasy, sort of like his Blind Joe death character. Gotta love it. Oh, and for my third choice, well, I was going to go with David Kilgour as one of the founding members of the Clean, a New Zealand rock group from the late 80s, right? But I went with a Clean record, one of these later Clean records from 2001, which is based on improvisations the band did in their rehearsal space. So it's a 3-way collaboration between David Kilgour, guitar player, his brother, Hamish Kilgour, the drummer, and Robert Scott, who's also the frontman for the Bats, all from New Zealand. And I just thought it was interesting the way they sort of improvise in equal parts in the songwriting. I mean, one person would sing, so you know that was probably generated by Robert Scott, but or David Kilgour. And Hamish Kilgour are the weird songs. So there's a little bit of weirdness. There's a lot of weirdness in these songs, actually. And Hamish, unfortunately, is no longer with us after a mysterious death. And the best thing about this for me is that it verges on space rock, and it sort of sidesteps indie rock completely at the same time, influencing it. I know indie rock is a bad word, but 2 bad words. But his guitar playing is really distinctive. The way he sort of holds back his tone, the way he embraces mistakes. It's sort of like postmodern Pete Townsend on lots of horse tranquilizers. It's definitely less is more, but with a wild edge that spills out every once in a while. So those are my 3. Big fan.
Which is Sonic Macaroni. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
And jus.
Go get a pair.
French onion with big gooey globs of cheese.
Bonjour.
Horse tranquilizers do sound comforting.
Who can do a good horse whinny?
You could
No.
have an escargot on your escarole.
Bonjour.
You know, I like candied yams and fried chicken and black-eyed peas.
I want some lettuce from the deep south.